pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Moines County Board of Supervisors, May the 3rd, 2022. Is there any changes to the agenda? Aye. We have one here. We have a emergency item needs to be taken care of. We will add that to the agenda. State of Iowa got tied up in the state of Iowa's.
Yeah, we didn't become
website.
aware of that until yesterday
Yeah.
afternoon when the person called and wanted to know where their liquor license was for their wedding that's coming up Saturday. And come find out when they applied through the state, they must have put state of Iowa in instead of a county, so it just hung out there, and evidently the state doesn't check for their junk mail or anything like that. So anyway, they called us and Angie made several phone calls, and we don't want to ruin somebody's wedding, so, and Tom was here, so, in the afternoon, because it was late in the afternoon.
We didn't want to face the family and a bride coming in here.
No. And the state even said, well, we forward the email, because Angie and I usually get an email when there's a license out there to be reviewed. And the state said that they sent it Friday, and neither one of us got it. So if it had been there Friday, it would have been on the agenda.
Okay, we'll add that. We'll go down and make that item H.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, meet with department heads and elected officials. Sarah Doty, payroll clerk, auditor's office.
Good morning. It was brought to my attention this morning that if you had a Voya account prior to us transferring over to T. Rowe Price, the beneficiaries did not transfer over correctly on everyone. So I did send an email out this morning to everybody with information on how to go ahead and you can log in on the website, or you can contact the gentleman at T. Rowe Price to get those added in. But if you have a T. Rowe Price account, you might want to make sure your beneficiaries are correct and added in there.
Thank you.
Other than that.
Colin, you grew a little bit. How's everything, IT, Brandon?
Good. Keeping busy as always.
Thank you. Sheriff Glendenning, how's the sheriff's department?
It's doing well. No major news from the sheriff's office. It is National Correctional Officers Week. So just a special thanks out to the correctional officers and everything they do. They work in a very difficult environment. We've got some amazing personalities out there that are prepared to handle that. So we're very thankful for them. On that note, we're at 69 at the jail. Nothing, no major changes out there and doing well.
Okay, thanks, Sheriff. Lisa Schaefer, Attorney's Office.
We're staying busy. This month yet, we have one of our homicide trials getting ready to proceed, as well as a armed robbery case, so we'll be pretty busy. At some point, I will need to get an agenda item for the opioid litigation, now that things are starting to be approved. Did a Zoom meeting while I was on vacation. Yes, I was on vacation and I still did a Zoom meeting for your opioid litigation. They finally have a settlement administrator appointed, which is what we've been waiting on. So that got done here a couple of weeks ago, so I should be getting some emails. They're predicting later this summer that disbursements will start to be made. So at some point I'll need to also get with Cheryl to make sure that we have a completely separate account set up for those funds that cannot be commingled in any way. And then we'll need to start maybe getting with someone from the city to see if we want to merge our funds together that we'll be getting, so we don't duplicate things and can maybe provide some better opioid abatement services. We'll also be getting a more detailed list about what we can and cannot spend the money on, and some examples. So more information coming hopefully within the next 3 to 4 weeks, now that the settlement administrator has been appointed. Once they get up to speed. I think there's still several defendants out there who have not yet settled. This was the distributors and Johnson & Johnson. There are a couple defendants who are in bankruptcy, but it looks like there's going to be some funds available for the opioid abatement settlements. And then there are a few that are actually getting ready to litigate in some other jurisdictions. So the hope is if they're unsuccessful there, that they may be ready to come to the table for everybody else. So we'll see. I think New York has a couple cases going and New Mexico, I think, with some of the actual manufacturers and retailers. So hopefully within the next year or so, we'll maybe add to that fund. We'll know probably within a month approximately how much we'll be getting and when.
Will a lot of that maybe go to the task force?
Pardon?
Will a lot of that money go to the task force?
We get to decide what to do with
We
it.
get-
I'm of the belief we should probably be looking at treatment options, not law enforcement, but that's something that ultimately can be discussed once we know how much money we're getting.
Thank
Because
you.
the treatment options are fairly limited, so I think we really should probably be focusing on that.
Thank you, Louise. Jared Laster, Southeast Iowa Regional Planning.
Morning. We don't have anything on the agenda today, but we've got a couple of minor subdivisions out for review. This evening at 5:30 at our office, we have a zoning commission meeting. Main item of business is a rezoning request to south of town. Spoke to Zach about this. I'm going to see if we'd be able to do a short work session possibly next week, since there would be some lag time in between, since it's considered a ordinance amendment, but that would need to have the public hearing notice published, so we couldn't just do it next week. So do we know offhand if next week would be?
We have one on there, I know.
I won't be here.
What?
I won't be here.
Okay. The main thought was that if just to answer any questions you might have before we have the final vote on it. So that just depends on whether we don't have to. I'm just a suggestion.
Check, see what we got after the meeting.
We would probably be short, most likely, just to give a quick background. You.
Okay, thank you,
That's all I
Jared.
have.
Chris Lee, Conservation.
Good morning. In a rare instance of federal government efficiency and responsiveness, our Big Hollow watershed plan has been fully approved. We've sailed through the review, update, re-review, and approval process in a matter of about 2 months. This is EPA talking about, so this is astounding. So we're thrilled about that. I'm working with the watershed team now to figure out the timeline and the next steps for applying for funding through the 319 program to get a watershed coordinator hired, so that we've got one central point of coordination, the same way the GEO did it, and then start working on getting implementation put in over the next year to 20. And so that's a big monkey off our back to have that thing done and fully approved, and so that qualifies us now for that federal funding in those programs, a lot of which GEO tapped to do a lot of the work that they did in their watershed. So we're really excited about that.
How'd you like a fire under EPA?
You know, I'm not sure how that happened. I had nothing to do with it. And the interesting thing is that one of the reviewers is set to retire right now. And so I don't know if they were just trying to make sure they had everything put to bed before they walked away, or whatever it is, but it zipped right through. So we got the official document over my email yesterday that said it's fully approved. So thrilled about that, because that puts us on the timeline. I think later this summer or early fall is when the 319 program opens up, and so having that done now allows us to get in on this grant cycle. So so we're excited about that. And then just the other big thing is we got that work session board meeting tomorrow there at Starscape in our office.
4:30. Thank you. Janelle, how's the trading going?
We're keeping busy. We just mailed delinquent notices and notice of tax sale yesterday. That was almost 1,200 of those, which is down. Usually it's a little over 1,500, so that's a good thing. But we'll continue to hopefully see some of those funds trickle in and work on the tax sale.
Thank you. Good night, the Steel Region Mental Health.
Good morning. I don't know if you noticed, but Chris Poggemiller had an excellent article in the Hawkeye today about mental health and about resources available to people in Des Moines County. So I appreciate her article, and we had talked before the article, and just thank you for doing that. That's wonderful. May being Mental Health Awareness Month, it's just a good time to get that in, so.
Say that's in today's paper.
Yeah, in
Some
today's
of us have been
paper.
awful busy this morning. We haven't had time to read papers yet.
Page 4A. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Trent?
I'm here for the work session.
Okay. Nothing to add to, okay, thank you. Terry, the auditor's office.
Good morning, we're busy preparing for the primary election. And I got a notice from the Secretary of State's office, because I requested them to send out cards to everybody, either individuals or households, to let them know what their voting precinct's gonna be, since we had the re-precincting and all that stuff, so. And they said those should go out they should hit the post office between the 18th and the 20th of this month. And then I also got a notice from the DNR about a hog confinement. I sent that publication to the paper just to request input, because that's all we ever do. We don't do the public hearings and all of that, but if anybody has any information, and this is for a site called the Big Farm site, and it's up in, I believe, in Washington Township. Yep, section 22 of Washington Township. It's a Trio Foods. So anyway, that notice should be in the papers, so.
Thank you. Brian Carter, Secondary Road.
Good morning. I think the same roads are still closed.
Definitely are.
Yeah, things are moving along. Geode has made good headway. I'm not sure, I mean, what's left, a portion of it definitely has to be drier than it is. So this isn't gonna be a good week for a lot of advancement on that, but the main line is in. I think they have one more concrete pour, I wanna say off the top of my head. But then it's gotta be backfilled behind the curb and stuff like that. So it's definitely come along and still got work to do. Pleasant Grove's a little bit further behind. We did get one good concrete pour in. Still gotta do the other half. They're doing it one lane at a time, so they gotta get that other half poured. Maybe this afternoon, just depending on weather. But it is on their radar, so I'm assuming this afternoon or tomorrow. And once they get that done, they'll probably switch traffic out of the quarry so that they're going a different direction so that they can continue removal on up the hill. So it's weather this spring has kind of dragged things out, is what I would say, but they are making headway when they can. Mediapolis Road's still closed. Hopefully that's getting closer, but yet again though, you can't do much dirt work when it's raining. So things are kind of dragging out. I did hear that the DOT is looking at some patching that's associated with their 4-lane project on a couple of the side roads at Dodgeville and Pleasant Grove coming up. I don't believe those are full closures from what I understand. They'll be 1-lane closures. So just a heads up, I don't know what this weather has done schedule-wise for their contractor that was gonna do that. I think at one time they're supposed to start this week, but I haven't heard of it starting, so that'll probably be we'll find out when it happens kind of a situation. So if you hear something, they are coming in to start doing some tie-in stuff and some rumble strips and some stuff like that are just more of a patch. So, but there will be some 1-lane stuff associated with that. Upper Flint's closed from the DOT, and then of course our project will start up. I believe they're targeting next week is the target for starting on our project. So yeah, there's probably some other stuff, but right now we're just waiting for it to quit raining again.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Rodney Blazner, Maintenance.
Good morning. Just keeping busy with a lot of different projects and things going on. Front steps are coming along. A little slow with all the rain in between, but they're moving right along. So looking forward to getting that done, hopefully here in the next couple of weeks. Other than that, I have an agenda item.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Rodney. Angie, how's the safety department?
Good morning, we're doing fine, keeping busy, but everything's going smooth.
That's good. Thank you. Christopher Miller.
Good morning.
Health.
Good morning. We're just keeping busy, nothing new to report.
Okay, thank you. Don't think I missed anybody. We shall move on here. Correspondence, seeing none here, do any of you gentlemen have any correspondence? I do not. I have none. You have none, okay. Discussion and vote. We have payroll reimbursement claims in the amount of $146.70. Non-cashable taxable is $24.07.
Motion to approve. Second.
Sarah?
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Shane McCampbell,
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes. And we have accounts payable claims in the amount of $879,004. No cents.
Move to approve.
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes. We have the approval of the Anderson, Larkin County and Company engagement letter for fiscal year 22 audit.
It's just an engagement letter. It's a boilerplate letter of the understanding that the services they're gonna perform and what they're gonna provide for the audit, the upcoming audit for the current fiscal year. Motion to approve. Second.
Sarah?
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Shane McCampbell,
Yep.
Jim Carrey.
Yes. Okay. Engineering service and jail project. Short form agreement for the engineer architect. Rodney, you wanna?
Yeah, good morning. This is for the jail project. We're looking after the roof and the siding. This project is gonna exceed the threshold set by the codes of Iowa. So we're gonna need to get an architect and come up with some construction documents. So this is for, we got a couple quotes. This one here is from Klinger for construction documents, help with some of the bidding documents and assistance and construction admin. For a total of $30,500. We got another quote from CMBA Architects, and it was at a total of $47,000. So we would recommend approval of the Klinger bid for $30,500 doing documents, bidding assistance, and some construction admin for this project.
Move to approve. Second.
Sarah?
Shane McCampbell,
Yep.
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes. Here we have personnel actions, 3 of them for the Correctional Center. We should do all 3 at once if you gentlemen don't mind.
Works for me.
The first one is for James Pleasant. And that's 6-month increase, $39,867.37 for $40,895.52 a year. Second one is for Cassandra Belknap. It's a promotion to dietary manager. Previous hour is $13.61. The new rate, that was an hour. The new rate is $37,880.14 a year. The third one is for Ruby Peterson, kitchen assistant cook, resignation.
Move to approve all three?
Second.
Sarah?
Shane Campbell,
Yes.
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Just so the board's aware, I spoke a couple weeks, maybe a couple months ago, about reaching out to some outside sources for providing our food. Put our internal costs together and then compared them to that, and we just decided that we could move forward on our own at just a better cost. So Cassandra has really stepped up over the last year, and she's been part-time, but we rely on our dietary manager to put together the food plan for the week. It's a 7-day operation, obviously. They work 40 hours a week, but they have to put together a 2,500 calorie diet for 70 inmates, one hot lunch or one hot meal a day. And she's really stepped up and done a great job. So we're excited to move her into a full-time spot and so we can take over that role.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yep.
We like that when you talk about saving money.
We looked at it, we tried, and we just thought we could do it better
Yeah.
the way we're doing.
Okay, we have the reports. For the correctional center, these will be on file in the auditor's office for your reviewing at your own discretion. We have the minutes from the regular meeting on April 26, 2022.
Move to approve minutes?
Second.
Sarah?
Shane Campbell,
Yes.
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes. Now we have item H, which Terry explained to you already. Sheriff, Linda, you have no problem with this, I don't think.
I'm not aware of where it's at.
Not aware of it.
Is that
Okay.
Myers.
Yeah, no issues there at all.
It's applicant, and it's, I haven't had a chance to look at this either. So. Okay, this is Myers,
It's at Myers Tree Farm.
Myers Tree Farm, for the wedding that Terry explained to you earlier. Problem?
No issue.
I move to let them get married.
By all means. Second.
Sarah?
Shane Campbell,
Yep.
Tom Broker,
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes. Is there any other business? I have none.
I have none.
Future agenda items, I guess we'll find Paul.
Should tell us a story or something, Jim.
Well, I'm gonna be,
What's that? I mean, it might not be
Regulations plus COVID, I mean, they can come to the meeting if they wanted.
well, we only got 30 more seconds. You know, as nice and quiet as you people sit, I really do believe that we ought to have a curtain call of Brian's 5-year road plan. And everybody be here next week for it.
Perfect timing.
perfect timing.
Probably not
Not
gonna be here
fair.
next week. Okay, the 2 minutes are up. With an eye, we're out of here.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, we're gonna take a short break. We're gonna have a work session with, Russ and Okay, we're here for a work session.
Hold on.
But, Bruce and Greg, Russ, Chris Poganola, Board of Supervisors.
What's
Okay.
this?
We're not on yet.
We'll pull it up.
You're on, oh, okay. So we'll turn it over to Krista and the rest team.
Well, I'll just give a little overview. What brought us here was, so there was a new person at the Iowa DNR, and he contacted me at the end of last year and said we had not signed a 28E agreement for the environmental health contract in some time. So I took that to the Board of Health and had a conversation, and they definitely wanted to get Russ, as well as the county attorney, involved before we signed that. To talk about, some of the potential liability risks. So brought that to the board, as well as we had to, or the board had to readopt Chapter 38 of the Iowa Code 38, due to the fact that the Eric Day from Iowa DNR felt like that was not completely adopted the first time that it went through. So we've done that piece. Thank you to the county attorney's office. We got the Chapter 38 readopted, and now we're at the point to sign that 28E agreement. Again, I know there was some question about liability, I think really focused on the plume south of town. So that's the reason we were bringing the work session together to bring directly from the county attorney's office, as well as Bruce and Greg, who definitely are environmental health specialists or experts, and so hopefully to answer the questions for the board.
Do you have any questions you'd like to ask them? You've been working on that, Trent.
Yeah, so when I went through, I went through just from the legal perspective. So I did a deep dive into times when, when government entities were hit for liability under 455B, which is broadly the environmental statute for the state of Iowa, so not just for wells. The reality within that lexicon, it's really very seldom. There were some things with, they were going, where they were really trying to hit hard a lot during the 90s on the hog confinements were just, really getting attacked. All of those were unsuccessful when they were going after the government entities, but they were sometimes successful against the confinements themselves. To find one that that involved a well, I literally got all the way back to 1876. So we're talking 100-year, centennial year of our country, right? So just to kind of give you a flavor, the petition appears in substance that the defendant, the Independent School District of Mitchell, employed its co-defendants, John Pratt and George Moses, to drill a well in the schoolhouse yard with machinery which it was dangerous to leave unlocked and unguarded. That said well was to be sunk for the improvement of the district property. That said work was to let said Pratt and Moss at a certain rate per foot, and said district had no direct control over the same. That said district wrongfully and negligently permitted the work to be done during the session of school without requiring the machinery to be locked or secured while not in operation, and without any reasonably prudent provision against injuries therefrom. That the defendants Pratt and Moses left the machinery unguarded and unsecured against the school children who were lawfully occupying said yard as their playground, and without warning or notice to the teachers or parents, that the district was warned of the danger of leaving the machinery unlocked and unsecured against school children, and was requested to remove the machinery or provide against danger therefrom, but wrongfully refused to do so. that afterwards said machinery was left unguarded. The plaintiff, a boy about 9 years of age, and the lawful pupil of the school was injured by said machinery, that the accident occurred at noon time while the machinery was not being used and happened in the following manner. The plaintiff's schoolmates were at play with the machinery, moving the sweep around, being that part by which the machinery was operated when in use by a horse. And while they were so moving, the plaintiff stepped upon the bull wheel without any negligence on his part, and while his foot was resting on said bull wheel, it was caught and crushed. So anyways, this isn't environmental, but my point is, even that one, they found that the school district was not liable. So I didn't find any of these where somebody issuing a dig permit for a well was found liable. Well, we've all seen movies like The Pelican Brief or Aaron Brockovich, or heard stories of, what's that town in Indianapolis or whatever where they had bad water? What was that?
The name,
Where?
but I don't know.
Flint, Michigan, that's it, yeah. So there, I'm not saying there isn't concerns, and we do want to be diligent, but when you look at the document itself, the 28E, part of what that's doing, as it pertains to liability for us, if you look at block 3, it says, the entire agreement is all involved right here. Department authority to issue and ensure compliance with private water well construction permits to the extent that the terms of this agreement conflict with an act of legislature or with 567A. So they're going back to the chapters. They're constantly going back to the law. So this isn't going to extend any liability to us that we wouldn't already have. It doesn't give us any responsibilities that we don't already have by legislation. And then, so it's granting concurrent jurisdiction, which is already legislatively granted in 455B 187. And I think when you talk to the guys, they'll tell you, they already worked together with this and with the state, and it's a shared thing. But what's really nice is you get to this no defense created, so that's not like, oh, wait a second. But you read on, right? So if you get to section 4B, no defense created, nothing in this agreement shall be construed as creating a defense for any person except the county in an action by or against the department. And no person, again, except the county may use the terms of this agreement as a defense against the department in any action by or against the department. And then, as we move on to section, or part B of what section now?
Yeah, that might be helpful if I brought what I think brought a lot of this about. When I was running for the first time for this office, it was 2010, so I was attending the supervisor meetings. And a previous sanitarian was here, and the board had been given, I believe, a 2080 at that time. I assume it's similar. And so they had a work session. He said there was that plume, that contaminated water that's shifting around in Des Moines County. I believe it's heading mostly south. Anyway, he said Des Moines County does not have the personnel or the equipment to track that, to give approval for drilling of a well or something like that, which the 2080 wants us to have some of that responsibility. These guys will explain that better. But anyway, but he said, you're gonna have liability. He said, the state should be doing that. He said, we don't. So as I recall, I don't know whether the board refused to sign or just didn't consider it. But when this came up again, I remembered that discussion with that first sanitarian. And my concern is only that the county has no liability. It's fine, but that was my only concern was that it doesn't convey any liability for that plume or anything we can't control onto the county.
This 28E does not. So my understanding, the state of Iowa doesn't even track the plume. It's the federal government that tracks it. The state of Iowa had their environmental division understands where it's at because they're updated by the federal government, but they're the ones that are actually tracking the plume. This 28E agreement just says there's a new section within the requirements they're wanting us to look at, and we brought it today so you guys can see the new portal and some of the stuff that we look at when we're issuing a well. We're looking for underground contamination sites. We're looking for buried, identified buried tanks that are leaking, things that we know about, but we also know about the plume. So in talking with the DNR and the state, obviously the county, this 28E agreement is the same 28E agreement that we approved for Henry County. We approved the same one for Wisa County. I'm sure Des Moines County got the same one. Just the county's names change. But we also understand the plume's there, so we have to take it into account when we're looking at wells. But it could be there today and gone 10 years from now. And when I say gone, I mean shifted, moved on. I could issue a well today, and in 10 years, the plume's right on the well. So that would be malicious intent, and I think that would be one of the things that we would look at within the law is, did we maliciously intend for someone to get sick from this? If we put a well and approved a well smack dab in the plume, we have a good idea. We don't know for sure because we just know what we're being told from the federal government. And then I would say we would want to look at that hard and then make that determination at that time whether or not we're going to issue a well. There's probably wells issued 20 years ago. The plume's probably right on. We could go back and look at some of that stuff, but I wouldn't doubt it. But this 28E agreement has nothing to do with the plume. Zero.
And that was my only concern about the 28E, is that if it was gonna, the county was going to assume any liability, I wanted a legal opinion that wasn't exactly how it worked. And if it doesn't transfer any liability onto the county, I have no problem with it at all.
And it states within this 28E agreement, some of the stuff that, go in and look at your, just go down on the left-hand side, that's some of the stuff that we're gonna be checking into. So confinement buildings and underground storage tanks and leaking underground storage tanks. Those are the things that we're looking at. So we're within 1,000 feet of a leaking underground storage tank. Try to find.
How do you tell if it's leaking?
It's been identified by the DNR. So these are things that we know from the DNR's has identified them. So they've done soil samples and so if you have a fuel tank, every so often, the individual that has the fuel tank has to go out and grab a soil sample, generally from an independent lab. They're testing those soils and seeing if they're finding any of the minerals or agents that would be in fuel. So that's some of the stuff that they're looking for. Obviously, it just didn't show up. So if it's there, it's likely that it's leaking. Those are some of the things that even today, where old, say, gas stations used to be, they're still going out and pulling samples. There may be where they have sample wells nearby, so they're pulling samples out of those sample wells. And so scroll in, check on that, but actually find okay, you got one there. So there would be a leaking underground storage tank. So what Greg's got, now scroll back out. So what Greg's showing there is the 1,000 feet radius. So within that 1,000 feet radius, if an individual came to us and said, hey, I want to put a well right where his cursor is, our obvious answer would be no. But we wouldn't be the final. We would then kick it up to the DNR, and the DNR then would then make that decision on their end on whether or not they would want to consider a well in that area. And then we would have not only our decision, but we would also have the DNR's opinion on that as well. So this is just telling us that if we're within that 1,000-foot radius, that we've got to get a second opinion from the DNR. And that's really what we're looking at with this 28E. There was really nothing that we had before. This has been there for many years, but there was no requirement by the counties to look at it. With this 28E, what they're saying is this at a minimum you need to review before you're issuing that permit. I mean, anybody can sue anybody. So liability, can I tell you it's absolutely not going to happen? No, because you could sue someone for eating a ham sandwich. So it's just one of those deals. So long as we're doing our due diligence on our end ensuring that we're not going within the 1,000 foot, and those are identified today. They could be identified next week, and we'd already issued the wells, been drilled. So did we maliciously intend for this to happen? No. But now you're within a 1,000 foot radius of the well. Some wells in the state are within a 1,000 foot radius. And so then, that's why we do the testing, and that's why we encourage people with wells, because you become your water operator. So, contact us and we'll come out and do well inspections and pull water samples and stuff like that.
I've actually tested 14 wells within that radius, within the last 2 weeks. That's the reason I pulled this up. I've done 14 well tests on this property in the last 2 weeks.
So if it shows that there's any contamination of that well, they fill it up?
There's different methods depending on what you're showing. There's different methods to deal with the contamination.
So typically what we're going out and testing for is we're going to test for nitrates and nitrites. We're gonna test for coliform bacteria, we're gonna test for E. coli. We're gonna test for manganese, it's a metal in the natural. And then one time in the life of the well, we're gonna test for arsenic to see if there's any, obviously cancer-causing agents there. And depending on if anything comes back positive, is dependent on what that is, and then what is the treatment. So a lot of those that I just explained, there's treatments out there that can get rid of them, or to reduce them to a level that it's not harmful.
There's treatments for E. coli?
Well, E. coli is not common in earth, so if we're seeing E. coli, it's coming from your septic system.
What about the manganese?
Manganese, that's a metal, so what you'd be looking at there is there's iron filters and stuff like that would potentially pull those out. For your nitrates and nitrites, you're looking at reverse osmosis.
But how's the manganese getting, how's that?
It could come from just traveling through the water. It's a metal, so it's prevalent in the earth. It could get into the aquifer that you're pulling from. We very rarely see it here. We have seen it, but we see it probably more so in northwest Iowa, northern part. But a lot of what we saw there 10 years ago, we're now seeing here. And if you look at the map where the DNR is tracking all of this stuff,
It's moving this way.
it's moving through to the south.
What's just real quick, what are you mostly finding though?
Typically, what we find the most is coliform bacteria, and that's prevalent in dirt. And coliform bacteria is a natural bacteria in dirt. The difference is it should not live where there's no daylight. It needs water, but it cannot have daylight. If it has no daylight, it should not live. So how is it getting into a well? And typically that's when we find a well cap that's not sealed. The electrical that goes into the well is not sealed, or bugs are getting into the well, mice are getting into the well. That could be some of your E. coli defecating in your well, now you're consuming it. Your nitrates and nitrites, again, prevalent. We see it every now and again in wells and testing. There's a certain level that 10 parts per million we want to start then treating. So you use reverse osmosis. And it really is harmful on 6 months and younger. So you or I probably not going to have any effect from it. But if you have kids that are 6 months and younger, that's who we do not want to get.
So in this 1,000 mile. 1,000 miles.
Not 1,000 miles.
1,000 miles takes us all.
Right.
In this 1,000 foot radius. Now, if it comes to you, you say, no, you can't dig a well there, it has to go to the DNR. So
Well, I wouldn't say no right away. What I would
Yeah.
do is I'd reach out for a second opinion. So as Greg's showing here, so we see a leaking underground storage tank.
Yeah.
There's 14 wells that he just tested in that 1,000 foot radius. We know that because he just did it 2 weeks ago. So at some point, somebody issued wells in this radius at some point, and it could have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and then all of a sudden a leaking underground storage tank was identified. So it doesn't mean that just because you have it there that it's going to not be approved. It just means now you need to be diligent, understanding and aware of what potential possibilities. So you as a homeowner, you may call in and say, hey, in addition to, I want to have this tested. So I want to, and I don't know what, we don't know what the leaking underground storage tank is, do you? You know what it is?
No, it's just a fuel, it's fuel.
Fuel, probably fuel. So that's some of the stuff that you may then request an additional sample tested to see if there's any of those identified within the wells.
And then the DNR, so your second opinion is always gonna be the DNR.
It's required under this 20E agreement that we kick it up to the DNR for final approval.
Okay, and then if they approve it, then that should take the burden off of us.
I would say we share the burden,
Share the burden, okay?
because the permits come to us and then we kick it off, but I would,
I've also got a map that the DNR has issued me that, for the plume as well, that it's the same scenario, that if somebody wants to dig a well in that area, it goes something in,
I guess my one question is, as we're talking about testing and testing for different agents, are there any agents that we know we should be testing for in the area of the plume? And we could, as a matter of policy, say, we think the plume is in this area, say in 2022 and 2023, so anything within this area or where it may move, we're gonna test for item X, I don't know, I mean, but that's what I'm asking.
the key there is we can only test what the state of Iowa's approved. So it's not like we have a carte blanche of what we can test for. And the reason why I say that is because the county gets reimbursed through grants to county. So so in our original 28E agreement for the grants to county stuff, they've identified what can be tested. Any additional testing that you request then needs to go to IDPH. If it's approved, then it can go back to us and then get tested. However, I mean, there's only a certain amount of money, and when you're going, and those are gonna be expensive, and where do we send those to? I'm not saying that can't be done, but I'm also, what I am saying is a homeowner in this area really needs to understand and be educated about what's potentially there.
But so these, when we talk liability, these types of discussions, when it's like we can't do it because it's not funding, and we know there's a risk, these are the type of discussions that create liability. So if we identify a risk, how much would it cost? I mean, you say expensive, are we talking $5,000 a year?
I have
$10,000
no
a year,
idea.
do we know?
I'm just telling you from a grants to county standpoint and from the DNR, grants to county only approves what they approve, and that's what we can test. So I wouldn't be running around or have my employees running around the county just testing because the county wants to test.
Well, they would have to be reimbursed, right?
Well, the county would have to then expense it,
Right.
and then we would have to then be reimbursed because it's not factored into our original contract.
Right.
So there'd be an additional expenses. However, we have a lot of well owners that don't test at all because they don't want to know. I hear that all the time. And, I try to educate the well owner that you can become your own water operator, and I would want to know what I'm consuming. But in this case here, there is risk, but again, the DNR doesn't even track it, the plume. It's the federal government, and then the federal government lets the DNR know where they think it is, and then, we then get sent stuff periodically. The last time we got sent something, or when's that paper was sent?
I think that was probably a year ago now, that they sent me that, the DNR sent me that thing.
And in talking speaking with Eric Day, he was pretty adamant that has nothing to do with this 20E agreement. I'm not saying it's not something the county shouldn't consider.
Right.
But it's not part of this 20E agreement.
Yeah, no, this 2080, I mean, in and of itself, to the extent it really shields us some liability-wise. But I think as we talk about your question as to the plume and liability, I think the reality is if we know that it's there, and we know if there's, and it might be, I mean, if the answer is, hey, it's gonna cost an extra $20,000 to test for whatever's in the plume per well, then maybe that's just unreasonable, right? And so maybe that's what the answer comes. But if we look and we say, hey, and find out it's gonna be an extra $200, that's not unreasonable.
But none of that liability is created by this 2080.
None of that, no.
And that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the only reason for this work session. Yeah, I'm sure that somebody goes looking for liability, they can find it.
Sure.
But as long as it's not created by 2080, that was my concern. And it was a concern that from my memories from 12 years ago. Thanks, Trent, thanks to you guys. My concerns are taken care of.
I'm satisfied now with what Bruce said about the second opinion. We're not gonna authorize, we're gonna say if we got a concern about it, we have to get a second opinion on it. When they come down on it, then that pretty much says we can do that. Even though we are in cahoots with it. Anytime you're in cahoots with the state, though, you know what happens.
Well,
You get the boot.
the way I look at it is the state of Iowa has full jurisdiction. They've given the counties jurisdiction to then have kind of the home rule per se through the 28E agreement, so long as we're enforcing the regulations as identified by the state.
Yeah.
What the state's then saying, hey, in this situation, we're gonna make the call.
Yeah, that's good. So it's not any different than what we have, outside of we're just having them make the call.
This tool here it's been there for a long time, and it's completely different from what we used to do. So now we're required, under this 28E agreement, to use this tool.
On the testing, for the wells, is this just water testing? If there's something like within where there's contamination found, is this just well testing, or is this well testing and ground and dirt samples as well every time?
So the federal government they have monitoring wells out there. That's how they're monitoring where this plume is going. So they're doing water tests.
Okay.
But in this case, where they've identified where we have contaminated underground storage tanks, those are soil samples.
So it's okay.
So
Never any soil samples on water though?
We don't do any, well, we don't. We do water tests. So we're primarily using the Ankeny hygienics lab and then Coralville's hygienics lab, depending on what test we're looking for. The manganese and arsenic goes to Ankeny. Everything else goes to Coralville.
Okay.
So it just kind of depends on what we're pulling from. But again, those are all identified in the Cranston County contract, and they say you have, carte blanche under these testing. So we can do all of these so long as arsenic's not been tested on the well. We can do it at least once, and then all of the other we can do annually. So I encourage people that have wells to test their well. Call us, come out and test it. It's free of charge, sort of. We all pay taxes. That's where it's coming from. And the county, each county gets allocated money from the IDPH to then do these tests.
Thanks, Bruce.
You bet.
Thanks, Rick. You enlightened me on it. Now, we'll run this before the board.
My concerns are assuaged, so. Oh, it's good.
So we can run this next week. You're not gonna be here, well, you might be.
I might be, but I don't have any problems with this.
We're gonna pass this without Tom next week and save the work session.
Just balance out next week. No, I don't, my only concern was that 28E created a liability for us.
Yeah.
Thanks to these gentlemen, I see that it doesn't.
So I'll put this on the agenda for next week.
Thank you very
I'll put
much.
this on the agenda for next week.
Yeah, put it on the agenda for next week.
Thank you. Look at you over there.